Why would a child want to stay with her? That's what the judge asked, right before my 7-year-old daughter stood up and said, I brought the video of what he does at night. I'm Jade. 6 months ago, I was just a night shift nurse at Mercy General, raising my daughter, Phoenix, on bedtime stories and pancake Sundays. I never imagined we'd end up in a courtroom, or that my child would become the bravest person I know. But the road that got us there, full of whispered warnings, sleepless nights, and quiet heroism, taught me that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it's a small voice that says, this is what really happened. So if you're ready, I want to take you back. Back to the moment everything seemed fine. Back to the love, the cracks, and the storm that slowly built. Let me show you how we got here, and how my daughter's quiet truth changed everything. Prior to the courts and attorneys, prior to the accusation-filled files and the restless evenings spent worrying about whether I would lose the most significant person in my life. We were alone, Phoenix and I. Every morning, the aroma of cinnamon buns wafted through the vents of our little 2-bedroom apartment above a bakery. Although our world was small and unpretentious, it was teeming with love. On most days, Phoenix would be wiping the sleep from her eyes and arranging her hair in all directions when I arrived home from the hospital just as the sun was rising. We established a little routine where she would rate the pancakes like a food critic, and I would prepare them in the shape of whatever animal she could think of. This elephant's trunk is a little floppy, she would remark, laughing and smearing her cheek with syrup. Every Sunday was Adventure Day, even if it only meant hosting a tea party in the park with her stuffed animals, or riding the bus downtown to the Children's Museum. I was usually fatigued from working the night shift 3 times a week at Mercy General, but I never missed those mornings with her. We had them. My favorite alarm clock was her little voice. Mommy, you promised pancakes, which woke me up. Phoenix had a calm curiosity and a kind, wary grin, and she was petite for her age. Despite not being the loudest child on the playground, she was perceptive. She once approached me when I was feeling really stressed and slid a sticker that said, "You're doing great," into my hand. I still have it in my wallet. Then everything was different. A letter was the first step. One Friday morning, a small white envelope slipped under our door. I initially believed it to be a bill, possibly another past due notice. No, it came from Caleb. The individual in question was my former partner, Phoenix's dad. When she was just 2 years old, the guy who had left our life, only the odd, late-arriving birthday card and unsigned child support checks that consistently bounced broke the 5 years of stillness. The letter was brief and official. He desired to get back in touch. It stated that he had changed, and he believed it was time to rejoin Phoenix's life. I was receptive, yet apprehensive at first. She should have known her father after all. So we went to coffee together. He had a polished, high-end appearance. Before breakfast, the man has his shoes polished. His business had recently gone public, although I was unaware of its existence at the time. His name had changed from Caleb to Caleb Sullivan, CEO, and all of a sudden he wanted to be Dad. It began slowly with occasional weekend visits and supper once a month. Phoenix was fascinated but uncertain. Quietly she would inquire, "Does Daddy enjoy stuffed animals? Or is it okay if I take Mr. Bear to his home?" I let her make the decision since I would rather not influence her experience, and things appeared to be all right for a time, until it wasn't. I can still clearly recall how things felt for the first time away. She was quieter than normal when she returned from spending a weekend at his place, holding Mr. Bear as if he were in danger of being taken. Her mouth trembled when I inquired if she had a good time, and she just muttered, "I want to go home now." The disintegration started at that point. The custody documents followed. He was requesting main custody, not shared custody. My heart was racing so hard it seemed like it might burst through my ribs as I sat at the kitchen table with the paperwork spread out in front of me. I was unstable, he said. Careless Phoenix said that working night hours made the workplace unsafe and unpredictable. Elena, my neighbor, who had seen Phoenix more times than I could remember, was incensed. As she read the legalese, her hands trembled. She remarked, "He can't just waltz back in like this after 5 years. However, he could, and he did. He also had attorneys. He had Diane, too. His recent spouse, she was polished, composed, wore high-end heels, and maintained a tight grin at all times. She sat next to him at the first mediation session as though she had always been a part of Phoenix's life. With a large house in Brookhaven and a backyard the size of our entire apartment complex, Caleb positioned himself as the steady, worried dad. For Phoenix, he had arranged for swimming lessons, a French teacher, and a specially made princess bedroom. And me. 6 months ago, my landlord said he would replace the water stain on the ceiling and the mismatched furnishings I had. The bedtime tales were not seen by the judge. Phoenix and I painted the solar system on her ceiling. Her eyes glowed with excitement when we cooked animal pancakes, but Phoenix was blind to her joy. Money was what he saw. Space stability. He didn't see her, though, not at all. What's the worst? I sensed her faltering. She began concealing her favorite toys before departing after another visit to Caleb's. My dear, why are you placing Mr. Bear in the washing hamper? One Friday afternoon, I inquired. So he'll be safe until I return, she muttered. There was a problem. I was unaware of its severity at the time. However, I was aware that I needed to keep my kid. I just had no idea that she, not me, would ultimately come to our rescue. The first time you feel invisible in a courtroom is an experience you will never forget. The lighting was strong and the walls were beige. It all smelled like anxiety and old carpet, with sweaty hands and a racing pulse. I sat at the defendant's table, though that's not what they call it in family court, trying to keep my composure. Conversely, Caleb appeared to be on the verge of concluding a commercial transaction. It's likely that his outfit costs more than my rent each month. Leaning back, he exuded confidence and ease. As if he was already aware of the outcome, Ms. Winters, his attorney, had the appearance of someone who never missed a deadline or an opportunity to ruin someone. Although she spoke with knives, she had a courteous grin. With that ideal mix of condescension and phony concern, she stated, Your Honor, my client is just concerned for his daughter's well-being. He wants Phoenix to have consistency. Stability, the kind of environment that's difficult to provide when the mother works overnight shifts and depends on rotating caregivers. My life was suddenly restricted to a work routine. They didn't mention that Phoenix had a hot meal, a bedtime story, and a warm hug every single night, or that those rotating caregivers were my sister Mia and our neighbor Elena, who was also Phoenix's honorary grandmother, and that they drove 40 minutes each way just to assist with bedtime routines. They only mentioned that I wasn't the one giving it because I was working to keep the lights on. Me. I was the weary mother who arrived at the court with a coffee stain on her shirt and a car that rattled. When it turned left, Caleb talked about private schools and weekend horseback riding lessons like he was trying out for Parent of the Year. He also looked the part. Clean record, steady income, 2-story house in a good neighborhood, and a wife with a master's degree in child development. One Tuesday afternoon, the court-appointed evaluator arrived at our apartment. She was courteous, but I could sense the judgment in the way her eyes wandered around the apartment, lingering on the mismatched kitchen chairs, the peeling paint, and the pile of nursing textbooks on the floor beside my bed. You work nights? She asked, holding up a pen. I said, It's the shift with the biggest pay differential. It lets me be home when Phoenix gets out of school. Every night before I leave, we have dinner together. She nodded and jotted something down, but she never inquired about my daughter's giggle or how we make folding clothes into a musical, or about the solar system I created on Phoenix's ceiling, or how Phoenix reads to Mr. Bear every night before bed. All they saw in the courtroom were checkboxes for school district income and square footage. They failed to notice me. Furthermore, they most certainly did not see Phoenix. I would drive home from each hearing, clutching the driving wheel until my knuckles became white, while Elena waited with Phoenix constantly attempting to divert her attention with sidewalk chalk or coloring books. With worried eyes, she would whisper to me, How'd it go? I was never sure how to respond. Because Phoenix was beginning to change away from the court. She was quieter and more reserved, and her eyes lost their brightness. She also didn't jump in the door, as she used to. The nightmares followed. She began to wet the bed for the first time in years, clinging to me. When she woke up, and I made an effort to speak to her softly and without pressing, I would inquire, Did something happen at Daddy's house? I'm just tired, she would say, shaking her head. It wasn't simply fatigue, though. She started concealing items, including her nightlight, Mr. Bear, and her favorite toys, putting them in drawers or laundry baskets before heading over to Caleb's. "My dear, why are you keeping them hidden?" With wide eyes, she would add, "So they'll be here when I get back." She would cling to me until Diane showed up at the door with her tight professional grin, saying, she was very difficult this weekend, loud enough for Phoenix to hear. She wouldn't eat her dinner. Threw a tantrum at bedtime. Maybe you're too soft on her. Every drop-off was like peeling Velcro. Phoenix seldom spoke until we were at least halfway home in the car. But one night, her voice pierced the stillness. "Miss Diane advises young girls to keep quiet unless someone speaks to them." I nearly had to stop. I spoke with my lawyer, the evaluator, and everyone else who would listen, and I reported everything I could. But they were constantly looking for more proof, more evidence, and more than a mother's intuition. One day I was called in for a discussion by Phoenix's teacher, Mrs. Kennedy. This is her artwork from the beginning of the year. She showed me vivid, colorful drawings of space animals and castles. And this is what she's been drawing lately. She continued, softly adding, "She's not herself lately. Withdrawn, distracted. Look, gray sky. Dark scrawls, a windowless dwelling." Mrs. Kennedy went on to say, "She asked me if children must live with their fathers even if they are cruel." I couldn't decide whether to yell or cry. I sat on the kitchen floor that night and called my sister Mia after Phoenix had gone to sleep. I said, "I'm trying everything I can, but it's not enough. I think I'm losing her." "You fight like hell, and you don't do it alone," Mia stated resolutely. However, I was unaware that Phoenix had already begun to battle for herself. She was obtaining the facts. All she needed was someone to hear her. Phoenix had just returned from another weekend at Caleb's, and I could tell immediately that something was wrong because she looked exhausted, like really exhausted, and not the kind of exhausted that could be remedied by a warm bath and a bedtime story. Her eyes were puffy and red, and she kept rubbing her wrist as if it hurt. It was a Sunday night right after dinner. I knelt next to her and softly said, "Did something happen, baby?" She shook her head, but I saw a little black bruise on the inside of her wrist as I rolled up her sleeve to assist her in changing into pajamas. I tried to seem cool as I said, "What happened here?" She hastily pulled her sleeve back down and turned her head away, mumbling, "I fell." However, there didn't appear to be a fall, and Phoenix wasn't a clumsy youngster. Normally, this was our time, and she would sit on the side of the bed and giggle as I worked through the knots, making up ridiculous stories about the tangled dragons that lived in her curls. However, that night after her bath, she was quiet. Too quiet. Fix. I began using her nickname. "You know, you can tell me anything, right?" As I gazed at her in the mirror. After giving a hesitant nod, she paused before asking, "Mommy, is it wrong to record people without their consent?" My heart hesitated. I responded carefully, "Well, sometimes it's not polite, but it depends. Why?" "I did something that might make Daddy really mad," she said, her lip beginning to shake. She then took her pink tablet from beneath her pillow, the one Caleb had given her for educational games, though I've never liked that he could choose which programs were installed on it. She tapped across the screen with little fingers, then stopped and murmured, "I named the folder Homework Pictures, so he wouldn't know." 3 movies were there when she opened it, although the first one was a touch crooked and blurry, presumably filmed by a youngster attempting to blend in. The tone was unmistakable, Caleb's furious, harsh voice. "Tell the judge that your mother leaves you alone at night, that you're afraid, and that you don't want to live in that dump," he said. But Phoenix's little voice said, "But that's not true. A door or a table could have slammed. Your mother is a nobody, so I don't care. Do you want to live in that small apartment forever? Just coach her better." Caleb, "She's 7. She'll say whatever we tell her to, if you stop being such a brute," Diane said thereafter. The second video was worse. Even though Phoenix had concealed the tablet behind a stack of blankets, you could still hear Caleb ranting about the court, his victory, and my impending get what's coming. The final one, the one that shattered me, came next. Caleb was walking behind Diane as she sat at a vanity, putting some sort of cream on her face as casually as if she were discussing dinner arrangements. After we obtain custody, we will relocate to the San Francisco office and be able to put an end to this entire situation. Fix is our ticket to destroying Jade, he stated. Diane asked without even raising her gaze. What about Phoenix? He said, the issue is resolved. Switzerland has good boarding schools. I'm sorry, Mommy. I know I'm not supposed to record people, Phoenix said as the video came to a close, looking up at me with tears in her eyes. No, sweetheart, I muttered into her hair, drawing her into my arms and holding her close. You did exactly the right thing. That night I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat on the couch with my iPad in hand and watched those movies repeatedly while crying. The little child I had dedicated my life to defending had defended herself because she believed no one else would. I went in sick to work the following morning and contacted two people, Mia, who promptly canceled her day to be with Phoenix, and Rachel Ahpour, a family court lawyer Elena had suggested. I had no idea what to anticipate when I first met Rachel, but she had a sharpness in her eyes, a calm, furious attitude, and she didn't waste time on small talk. She appeared to be in her early 30s. When I was done talking, she responded, "Let me see the videos." She watched them silently, her expression darkening with each one, and then she spoke at the conclusion of the final clip. We have to be careful because the judge might assume you coached her. In most states, recordings made by a child in their own home can be admissible, especially when documenting emotional abuse. I added, she kept it a secret from me, and I didn't even know she did it until last night. I think you will, and I think Judge Rivera will too, Rachel said, adding. But Phoenix might have to respond to certain questions. Is she ready for that? I don't want to put that pressure on her, I replied, my voice breaking, because she's only 7. That's why this is so powerful, Rachel said. No child should ever feel compelled to do something like this, but she did. She did it because she was afraid. That says a lot. Phoenix and I sat at the kitchen table that night, eating marshmallows and hot cocoa, and I gently explained that the films would be useful in court, but that it also meant that someone, possibly the judge, might want to speak with her. Will Daddy be there? She said, gently stirring her glass. Yes, but Rachel and I will be there the entire time, so he can't harm you. I'm afraid of going back to his house, but I'm not afraid of questions, she added, glancing up at me with those eyes that always seemed too knowledgeable for her age. That was it. The truth at the core of everything was contained in that single word. She clutched Mr. Bear tightly and added, Miss Diane says little girls should be quiet, but I think, if you're too quiet, no one hears you when you need help. As I stood in the doorway turning out the light the night before the last hearing. You're right, baby, and they're going to hear you loud and clear tomorrow, I said, nodding with tears in my eyes. I took it as a sign, not a negative one, necessarily. Just a little weighty, as if the sky itself understood what was at stake when it poured the morning of the last hearing. It wasn't a storm or a drizzle, just one of those constant, dreary downpours that seem like they're soaking through your bones. I placed her tablet in my tote bag, making sure it was completely charged, and tried to grin as if my hands weren't shaking. Phoenix insisted on wearing her favorite blue outfit with the silver stars, saying, "It makes me feel brave," as she meticulously combed her own hair. Remember what we practiced. Okay, if someone poses a question to you, please respond with honesty. You don't have to say more than you're comfortable with, Rachel said, kneeling down to Phoenix's level as she greeted us in the courthouse foyer. Phoenix, holding Mr. Bear firmly under one arm, remarked, I practiced with Mr. Bear. In the courtroom, which was packed with more people than normal, Caleb sat next to Ms. Winters, looking as polished as ever, and when he noticed Phoenix, he gave her that big, practiced grin he usually had when someone else was there, and she stared at him, but didn't return the smile. Instead, holding my hand harder. We stood as Judge Rivera walked in. He was grave, much more so than usual, and I had been wondering over the last month which side of him we would see, the cynical one who questioned why a kid would choose to stay with me, or the kind one I thought was still there behind that black robe. Your Honor, Mr. Sullivan has consistently demonstrated his ability to provide financial stability, a nurturing home environment, and educational opportunities that Ms. Roberts simply cannot match. Mrs. Winters made her closing argument first. She was calm, professional, and detached. While we acknowledge Ms. Roberts' effort and love for her daughter, it is in Phoenix's best interest to reside with her father, where her full potential can be realized. Rachel reached over and gave me a little grip on the arm, a quiet warning to remain composed, and it took everything I had not to respond. Your Honor, this case is not just about square footage or income. It's about where a child feels safe, loved, heard. Ms. Roberts has provided a consistent, emotionally stable home despite difficult circumstances. The question today is not who has more, but who truly sees Phoenix, Rachel said as she stood up when it was our turn, speaking with a quiet strength that made you lean in. When both sides had finished, Judge Rivera turned to face me, his face inscrutable as he listened. Ms. Roberts, he started, the court must take into account what environment best supports your daughter's development. Why would a child choose to stay with her mother when her father can offer so many more opportunities? I understand the difficulties of your situation and the obvious love you have for your daughter. It was a familiar, cold inquiry. Phoenix then released my hand and got to his feet. Pardon me, she replied in a quiet but distinct voice. The whole courtroom became cold. I brought the video that shows his nighttime activities. Judge Rivera, obviously taken by surprise, blinked and said, Young lady, this isn't your honor. We've submitted this material as Exhibit D. Phoenix recorded these clips herself. We're asking the court to review them in chambers, Rachel said as she rose up hurriedly. Your Honor, these videos were submitted late and we filed a motion to exclude them, said Ms. Winters, who was already standing. And you did so without reviewing the contents. Rachel remained unfazed. We are asking the court to consider this evidence directly from the child whose best interests we're all here to protect. Judge Rivera groaned and called for a recess after glancing between us and then back at Phoenix, who was standing quietly in front of him, holding her iPad. In a little conference room down the hall, Rachel, Phoenix, and I waited. Phoenix drew calmly in a notepad she had brought while I kept pacing. After 30 minutes, we were summoned back inside, and everything had a new feel to it. The gathering held its breath as Judge Rivera's countenance changed, from neutral to harsh, even hostile, as he turned to face Caleb. This court finds the behavior exhibited by Mr. Sullivan toward his daughter to be deeply disturbing after reviewing the submitted recordings. He said, adding that the recordings unequivocally show repeated attempts to coerce a minor into giving false testimony, as well as a troubling disregard for her emotional welfare. Caleb moved in his chair, his face losing its color. Judge Rivera went on to say, the child's voice, unscripted and emotionally authentic, demonstrates both fear and confusion. There is no indication these recordings were coerced. In fact, her initiative to capture these moments suggests she felt unheard and unsafe. That alone is enough to change the direction of this court. The judge interrupted Ms. Winters as she started to object. Enough! The child's welfare is at stake, not the veracity of the recordings, and her voice has been disregarded for long enough. With a softer tone, he turned to Phoenix and said, Did someone tell you to make those recordings, sweetheart? No, sir. I just wanted someone to believe me. Phoenix said, shaking her head. Judge Rivera gave a gradual nod. Ms. Jade Roberts has been granted full physical and legal custody by this court, and Mr. Sullivan will only be allowed supervised visitation until he completes parenting classes and a psychological evaluation. This is ridiculous, Caleb said as he abruptly sprang to his feet. She manipulated her. Those videos, she probably doctored them. The judge remarked firmly, Mr. Sullivan, I really advise you to stop talking. Phoenix glanced at her father with steady eyes and didn't flinch. She said, I didn't lie, Daddy. The tablet you gave me makes really good videos. And then there was stillness in the courtroom. It wasn't fear, though. This time, relief was felt. Phoenix gave me a little smile as we stepped outside into the rain. She said, Can we have pancakes for dinner? We can have pancakes for breakfast, lunch, and dinner if you want, I said, laughing. For the first time in weeks. I just want to go home. she said as she put her hand in mine. We then headed home. Everything appeared the same. Our apartment, the pavement outside, the pile of library books near Phoenix's bed. But the weeks after the last hearing were like rising to the surface after spending too much time below. Everything felt lighter, quieter, and safer. We learned that Caleb and Diane moved to San Francisco as planned, but without the little girl they had formerly attempted to use as leverage. Caleb attended 2 monitored visits before he ceased showing up completely. Phoenix seldom inquired about him. At one point before bed, she asked me, "Do you think Daddy will come back?" I hesitated for a second before giving an honest response. "I don't know, darling, but I do know that you're safe now and that this house will always hear your voice." Nothing was more important than that vow. Just knowing that shield was in place brought me a type of calm I hadn't had in years. With Rachel's assistance, we were able to get a protective order that prohibited Caleb from pursuing custody claims in the future, unless he could show evidence of significant improvement, such as treatment parenting classes, or consistent conduct over an extended period of time. In the community garden behind our apartment building, Elena threw us a small celebration. It was simple, with a homemade cake, fairy lights, and Phoenix running around in her brave blue dress. The cake read, "Our brave girl," in shaky, hand-piped letters, and Phoenix smiled the entire time as if the sun had finally returned for her. I recall standing next to Elena as Phoenix demonstrated how to use sidewalk chalk and toy animals to teach a few other children how to play courtroom. Elena suggested that you speak with the Advocacy Center downtown since many families could benefit from your tale. She was correct. Our tale was no longer just ours. Even though I didn't always have answers, I had experience, and sometimes that's all someone needs to hear. From someone who survived, I began volunteering twice a month at the Family Justice Center, sitting with other parents in waiting rooms, helping them fill out forms, and providing a safe space for their fear and anger. Phoenix would occasionally accompany them reading or drawing quietly in the corner. Every now and again, she would grin at a younger kid who entered as if to say, "I've been where you are." Rachel then contacted me one afternoon with unexpected news. She virtually buzzed on the other phone as she continued. "Judge Rivera is putting a new family court protocol into place. It's named after Phoenix. You won't believe this." What? I blinked. "It provides children involved in custody disputes with additional tools to safely share their experiences, including secure interviews, options for recording statements in safe settings, and most importantly, guidance for judges on how to actually listen to what these kids are saying," she said, referring to it as the Phoenix Protocol. After that call, I sat there for a while, simply looking out the window and clutching my coffee cup. My 7-year-old daughter is already making a difference in the system for other children in her age group. Phoenix said to me that evening. "Mommy, does that mean we're famous now?" "Not famous, but we were heard, and sometimes that's more important," I said with a smile. Although I continued to work long hours, and bills continued to arrive on time, the terror had vanished, and the tension that had previously accompanied every door knock and mailbox letter had been replaced with something more stable optimism. We settled into a new routine, which wasn't easy, but it was ours. Mia watched Phoenix on the weekends and assisted me in enrolling in a daytime program to complete my nurse practitioner degree. Phoenix glanced up from the batter with that contemplative expression she always gets just before asking a huge question one Sunday night as we were preparing pancakes for dinner. Because that's still our thing. "Do you recall the judge asking me why I would prefer to remain with you over Daddy Mommy?" "I recall," I said. "I apologize for not responding aloud. I simply displayed the videos. That was more than enough." I nodded slowly. "But I know the real answer now," she said after pausing. "What's the real answer, sweetheart?" I asked her, turning off the burner and focusing entirely on her. Her front tooth had recently fallen out, yet she still grinned. "Because you believed me when I finally spoke up and you listened when I was silent." I embraced her, forgetting about the pancake batter. In that instant, I realized the most potent lesson we had both learned from it all. Truth has a voice. It may be loud at times, veiled by fear, and quiet at other times, or it can be a wobbly whisper from a little girl clutching a pink tablet. However, nothing can stop it once it eventually finds a way out and is believed. On my way to the kitchen one evening, I walked past her room and overheard her speaking to Mr. Bear. Because the truth is the most powerful superpower of all, that is how we prevailed. Mr. Bear. I grinned. She was correct. Perhaps someone who is feeling tiny and unheard needs to realize they are not alone, which is why I will never stop sharing her story. So wherever you are, if you're listening, hear this. Your voice counts. Your narrative is important, and you have a right to be heard for the truth. Your truth. We appreciate you sharing your tale with us. This is Jade, and this is our little phoenix finally free until next time. Free until